Mark wants to be somewhere other than where he's at, but doesn't everybody want to be somewhere other than where they're at? Welcome to Bad First Impression, the podcast about movies and where we meet them. Normally, this is a podcast where every week, me and a guest go to see a movie in a theater and discuss how the theatrical experience affected our impression of the movie. But not this week. We had a last-minute change. Returning to the show, I have filmmaker Alex Campo.
Bit unexpectedly last minute.
As in I texted you, I think it was 9:40 last night.
Yep.
And we'll talk about it in a second here, but we sat down to watch the movie at 11 o'clock this morning.
Yes.
So this is actually a movie that we had previously discussed doing an episode on. We'd actually literally had a screening booked and then had to cancel last minute.
Yes. But instead we watched it in my living room.
Instead we watched it in your living room. So our venue was, should I say your address or not? No, you don't want to be doxxed. Okay, cool. I'm not going to dox you on YouTube. No, the movie we watched is American Movie.
Yes.
One of, I feel like, your favorite
Probably
movies.
My favorite documentary of all time.
Yes. I remember you, when we were new coworkers a couple years ago at this point, you were very insistent about giving it to me. Once it became obvious we were both people who were into film, this was something that you literally bought to me in a jewel case.
Yes.
And insistently kept trying. And it was awkward because I didn't really know you all that well yet. And you were like, you should do this. And honestly, the fact that you presumed I would relate to this movie so early on into meeting me is a little insulting.
Maybe a little bit. It's definitely a movie that I have a very strong personal connection to. I watched it for the first time when I was 12. And this was a time period where I was I learned very early in my life that I wanted to be a filmmaker and I wanted to make videos. And this was something that really spoke to me, maybe a little bit more as I'm even older now. But you're not the first person I've subjected to this film. Pretty much everyone in every workspace I've gotten into this movie, or I've at least suggested that they watch this movie over time. And I do find there's a lot of mixed reaction to it.
To be clear, I don't feel subjected to this movie. I do, especially after this most recent viewing, out and out love this movie. I think this is a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
It is. I don't know if it's my favorite documentary, but it's up there. I really like this one a lot.
Yeah. And that's kind of interesting because I think I said on my last time I was here that asking somebody to watch something twice for the full experience is way too much. It's always too much. And I'm glad you got a better experience out of it the first time, but you want to talk about how you felt the first time watching this?
Yeah. Speaking of, it wasn't necessarily a bad first impression. It was a medium first impression. I watched it and I liked it and I appreciated a lot of things about it. But maybe I think it was honestly a victim of being hyped up a little bit too much, if anything.
Okay.
Because I came out of it and I said, I get what it's trying to say. I think my takeaway at the time was it's not saying anything that's particularly, new or insightful. I disagree. I think that the things it's saying are, depicted in other works as well, but maybe not as maybe in not such a raw, kind of undeniable sort of way.
It's a very real feeling film.
Yes.
Nothing feels polished. It's I don't want to say it's ugly, but it's pretty ugly 16 millimeter stock that they're using. It doesn't look great. It feels like you're just plopping a camera amongst a group of friends. That's really what it feels like.
It has, I feel like we should just do because this is actually a very simple movie to describe.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. Do you want to do the synopsis?
Love to. So American Movie, the premise is that Mark Borchardt is on the quest to make the next big, great American film, which, say it with me, is called Northwestern.
Okay. I thought we were going to say American Movie. I don't know why.
So he's on the quest to make this movie Northwestern, which, by the way, has still never been made.
Yeah.
Northwestern is a film that's never been made. And that's covered in this film because things don't always go to plan and filmmaking is kind of expensive. So on the quest to make Northwestern, he picks up an old project of his and decides to finish it to fund Northwestern. And this project is called Coven.
Not Coven.
It's not pronounced
Very
Coven
emphatically.
because Coven sounds like oven, man.
I always thought, so there is a scene where this is addressed specifically in the movie.
That's the exact dialogue.
Another actor who's in it says it should be called Coven. That's his rebuttal, as if
He's like, it's called Coven, man. How else would it be pronounced? Coven.
It can't be the word Coven on the basis of it rhymes with oven.
Yes. I love that actor, by the way. His name is Robert. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head.
Something George?
Robert George, I think is his name.
So, yes.
Robert is the face that you would think of when you hear the word theater. He is definitely a guy who pronounces it as the theater.
He's kind of got a Matt Berry vibe to him.
No, he's got I am a theater person vibe to him.
Do you know who Matt Berry is? The guy from What We Do in the Shadows?
Oh, yeah.
That's who I'm describing.
Gotcha. Yeah,
this
very
like
much,
big,
very much.
grandiose.
He looks like a vampire.
Yes. But anyway, so he's trying to make Coven to basically get out of debt and finance finishing up Northwestern.
Which I would tell you, I've been in the short film circuit for the past year. You don't make money off of that.
Yeah, it is really funny.
You
to
lose
see
money on that.
How inadvisable it is, and we can talk about the specifics of his business plan. More as we go on.
Well, that's actually kind of important to cover. So, like, why don't we cover that real quick?
Yes. So his Coven is a movie that he had done some work on, I think 2 years prior to the making of the documentary. Mm-hmm. And he was going to finish it with the stated goal of selling 3,000 units, which we can talk about what a unit constitutes, but 3,000 units at the rate of $14.95 each.
$14.95, 3,000 to make a budget or to make a return of 45,000.
Yes.
And this would be, presumably he would be selling this directly to consumers and not to stores, so he gets all of that money.
Yeah, he
back.
describes it as a direct to market. So he's doing this, basically what he's saying is he's doing this without a distributor attached.
Yep.
So the documentary effectively, like very early on, not even halfway through, becomes about the making of Coven to recoup the losses on the, as of 2024, unfinished Northwestern.
And we actually get to see a little bit of the frustration that director Chris Smith runs into in that fact, because he signed on to make the behind the scenes production of this big feature. And now he's just filming this guy funding that feature.
Yeah.
So you want to let's talk about, taking those opportunities and finding something really interesting in what could be, kind of a hard story to tell. Would you like to look at what Chris Smith has done after this film?
So let's go ahead, and you told me specifically to look this up prior to the episode.
Because this would be a very fun reaction to see.
Okay, so
what he's done afterwards.
The IMDb for Chris Smith.
So director Chris Smith, who went on to produce.
Let's see, I'm pulling it up right now. Chris Smith.
Went on to most famously produce.
He went on to most famously produce
little TV show on Netflix called Tiger King.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a little documentary called Fire. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So this guy is kind of known for finding all of those documentaries that he's got in there, especially recently the Fire Festival documentary and Tiger King. Really crazy
he did
cool stories.
He did Senior, the Robert Downey Sr. documentary for Netflix last year.
So he's very good at finding What I find is that his movies, he's very good at finding these characters. Mm-hmm. If you remember anything from Tiger King, it's filled with characters. An American movie equally so. It's all about the characters. We talk about the story, but really what you take away from it is the characters.
Yes.
Most importantly is Mark Borchardt, the main character of the film.
Mark Borchardt, the director of Northwestern / Coven. This is what this movie ends up mostly being about, is the struggles of a not even independent filmmaker, like a completely unfinanced filmmaker, basically corralling I don't know. It's in Wisconsin. I don't know.
It's in Wisconsin.
Do you know the name of the town? I don't know.
I know they're right by Milwaukee, but they're not Milwaukee.
A small Wisconsin town who have dealt with this guy their entire life. Into making this thing that some of the early interviews are like, well, especially when they're talking about it being Northwestern, is they're like, I've known this guy his whole life. This is the only thing he's ever talked about doing. This has been his live stream. The one guy says, I can give up 10 weekends of my life for that. And it's just kind of, I would say it's about a guy spiraling out of control, but there are two issues with that. One, he's out of control at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
There's a really, the second or third scene is him opening up bills and saying, oh, I owe the state $1,500 in taxes.
Delinquent. Yeah. You owe collections.
Yeah. There's one bill where he says,
What are they going to do? $81? What are they going to take from me?
He says, are they going to take my Night of the Living Dead book?
Oh, yeah.
And you actually see there are pan shots over the background of his office, and it's all these filmmaking books.
He's got like 40 Spike Lee books.
And DVDs and stuff, or not even DVDs.
I think they're just books.
Yeah. So it's not him spiraling out of control because one, he's already out of control and like fairly knowing and accepting of that fact.
Yes.
He doesn't seem to think this is all going great. Mm-hmm. And two, while there are definitely moments of self-doubt and frustration, mm-hmm. he is a pretty indefatigable person. He seems like pretty impossible to deflate.
Yes.
Even though circumstances are almost never going to his favor. He has a family to support that he is largely not doing. Mm-hmm. And his family are, in some cases, actively discouraging him from doing what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And he still seems to be doing this mostly just for the love of it.
I think so. And that bill scene is actually a really great outliner of mm-hmm. his character in total, because he's getting all of these bills. He's seeing he's delinquent on payments. They're sending collections. He owes all this money. He opens the last envelope and he goes, "You've been pre-approved and selected for credit." And he goes, like, turns to the camera and he goes, "Kick fucking ass, man. I got a MasterCard."
He's like, sometimes life's not so bad, I think is what he says.
Sometimes life is kind of cool.
And that's the kicker to that scene. I think the first time I watched it that made this so frustrating to like, because
you said that to me, is that it's a frustrating movie to watch.
Realizing that this is the character I'm going to be asked to connect with for the duration of this. You watch that scene really early on that he is knowingly in a hole. It's not that he's ignorant to it. He's knowingly in a hole and then decides to just dig it deeper, basically, yes. because he doesn't really have any other. It's not even necessarily he doesn't have any other skills, because he's clearly a fairly competent person. He's a capable person.
Competent is the word I would use. A competent filmmaker.
Yeah.
What he wants to do, he's actually competent. It's not, this isn't a show where, or a movie that's making fun of him at all. This is like, it's not. It's
pretty sensitive to it. And you would expect something like, especially something like this made in the modern day, that it might end up kind of coming off as ridiculing him.
Yeah.
If there is any frustration Chris Smith, the director of American Movie, mm-hmm. has with Mark Borchardt, it's he doesn't misdirect it into, he's not out for vengeance with this movie.
It feels like it's an American dream movie, but our protagonist is not capable of fulfilling his goal. That's kind of what it feels like.
It's because, it's interesting. He
wants to do it. He just doesn't have the resources.
Mark Borchardt, the main character, has two brothers who are mm-hmm. like talking heads in the movie, but they don't take place in the production of Coven.
No.
One of them, I will say, is the biggest hater of all time.
Yes.
He's sitting there saying things about Mark that I imagine are probably well-founded in a lifetime of experience and are probably true.
And he's saying it as if it's not going to appear in his brother's documentary.
Yeah. And then you see it and I'm just like, geez, man, it's a real insight into the way that we can kind of frustrate the people that we end up spending our entire lives around.
Yeah.
But he sits there and he says, he's like, I think that what he's ultimately best suited for is, working a line in a factory, basically mm-hmm. saying his brother is not good for anything other than
and Mark takes labor. A lot of offense to that over the film. There's a scene where he's very, very drunk and he's yelling about, I'm never going to be in the factory, man. I'm better than that, man.
Yeah.
If I say man a lot during this, it's because this is the kind of movie that alters your vocabulary when you watch it. This is a movie that teaches you new ways to swear.
This movie has I'm from the Midwest. I'm not from Wisconsin. I'm from Indiana.
Yeah.
Where the accent is, I always describe the Midwestern accent in general, which has a ton of variations because it's over such a large area. Mm-hmm. It is kind of Canadian light. It's a lot of like,
you can tell by the way in this movie that they frequently say the word soda.
And it's a lot of, and it's a lot of extended vowel sounds. Yes. You talk a lot slower.
A lot of vowels.
In the case of Mark, but this is definitely the case with a lot of Midwestern people, myself sometimes included. You start another sentence while you are middle of the previous sentence.
And that's a little frustrating when it comes to Mark, because Mark sometimes doesn't even finish a thought. He very frequently just rambles and rambles and rambles. And it's like he's talking about what he wants to get out there, but he never quite finishes his original statement, or he just like says four things in a row that in his head, I'm sure makes sense, But as a storytelling kind of person, especially as a director of the film, you should be able to communicate a little bit stronger than the way he is in this movie. He's very train of thought in his communication.
He's clearly got a lot of ideas, some good, some bad.
And again, it's because he's enthusiastic about what he's talking about.
And I think that this kind of speaks to what is the X factor for why he could never break into like actual commercial success, like not even just like success, but like career viability.
Yeah,
basically. And I think it's his big issue is that he cannot corral all those ideas and all the enthusiasm that he has. And he's doing this. I think that he's making these movies because it's fun first, and less because he thinks he has an aptitude, and even less so because he thinks he has something to say with it.
I think so. And if you watch, in the movie, I think it's portrayed he's not a great director. You never really see him directing people. You more see like he is a competent filmmaker, but he's not a great director because people around him are fairly confused all the time.
I think this is fair, but in a mild defense of Mark's directing style here, he's not working with professionals.
Yes.
He is oftentimes not working with people who even want to be there. Oftentimes it's family members who you can tell from their reactions are being asked, and this is not the first time, to do something that they are not trained for, not interested in doing at the expense of doing other things that they need to. And like literally there's a scene where he asks his mom to be a stand-in extra when she needs to go to the store to get groceries.
This is
like, says, don't go do that.
This is leading into what I want to talk about most about this movie is how incredibly relatable this is to my own experience growing up.
Yeah, I know. The first time I watched this and I brought you the lovely little jewel DVD case back, and you said, what did you think? And I immediately, I was like, you're telling me you found something relatable and inspiring in this movie? What I don't
even
get that
down
at
to
all.
Having my own mother be an extra in something I've made is something I've done in the past.
Was your mother as frustrated with the request as Mrs. Borchert was in this movie?
I think after a while, I think maybe the first 2 times my mom was okay with it, but it's like, oh, you're doing this every week now. Stop.
Oh, is it gonna be a thing?
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna.
You got to make some friends.
Yeah, no, I think that this is like a very. I found this movie so almost cathartic to watch, honestly, because we want to talk.
Yeah, you know what cathartic means?
There's literally a moment, and we actually haven't even touched on Mike yet. And I would love to talk about Mike. But before we do that, I just wanted to say that this, you described it as dirty, which I think is unkind but fair. It represents a hyper specific aesthetic that, in my mind's eye, basically only exists in like half memories I have from when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And it's being lower middle class in the middle of nowhere. I mean, even more hyper specific to me, like being in the Midwest, but I was seeing types of wood paneling and cabinetry and countertops that I remember just being popularly mass produced at the time.
You pointed out to me, you were like pointing at the screen. You're like, do you remember Surge?
There's a scene where I said, do you remember Surge? And then immediately afterwards, the character says, it's Surge. It's the new soda.
It's the new soda from Coca-Cola.
And it's what makes this genuinely feel a little bit like outsider art, because it shows being an outsider, not necessarily in terms of what you have to say, which I think is a lot of how outsider art is talked about, but it is outsider in terms of a way of life.
It's not from a like wealthy, well-off perspective. It is from a lower class suburban perspective, kind of
absolutely
real story of somebody who sees the American dream, thinks they can do it, and is doing everything they can to make it happen.
And you realize that in the case of Mark, there are many factors, some of which are his inability to compromise, his inability to understand the spaces within he's working. But a big part of what I think is running through this movie, and it actually reminded me of a little bit of Sam Raimi's A Simple Plan, is the just utter hopelessness that living in certain areas of the country you are condemned to basically at birth.
You almost feel, I get the feeling that if Mark just had the money to begin with, first of all, we wouldn't have the movie. But if Mark had the money, he would have made it.
He would have made it, and then somebody would have financed something else. Yeah, if he was born into a well-off family. But you realize that his stubbornness is to disprove this notion that by the nature of his birth, he should be condemned to a specific type of life that he, doesn't want to live.
Yeah.
And you realize that, like, for a lot of people that, like, obviously, we're kind of sold this idea of the American dream. And, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do anything. And I think by actually seeing the circumstances that many people in this country are forced to live in, you realize that is a complete and total fabrication.
Yeah.
And that this is just the life. This is the life that Mark has to live.
Mm-hmm.
His competency, his talent, what he has to say almost has nothing to do with whether or not he would ever actually be able to get this to a commercially viable space.
And that's where the relatability comes from, is 99% of the people watching this movie understand.
Yeah.
They've been there. And if you're, whether or not you're a film nerd and you're watching this, or you have any interest in going into making film in the future, you understand that struggle of not having the resources or support.
Yeah.
This is a goofy movie where people say motherfucker all the time.
Yeah.
But it's still like there's still deep moments in this movie.
There is, I wrote it down because due to a recent birthday related events.
Yes, please.
It really spoke to me. There's a line where Mark has a part-time job or day job, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly grim. He vacuums. He cleans at the cemetery. Yeah, he cleans like the inside building at the cemetery. Mm-hmm. He vacuums it and everything. But he talks about he's going to clean the bathroom one day, and he says in the center stall there, somebody has not shit in the toilet. They have shit on it and around it and behind it and on the walls. And the quote he says there that has been ringing in my head ever since then, and I will probably never stop thinking, is he says, I'm 30 years old. And I'm about 10 seconds. He says, I'm standing there for 10 seconds or so. Mm-hmm. Because I'm thinking, I'm 30 seconds here. I'm 30 years old, and in about 10 seconds, I got to start cleaning up someone else's shit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to feeling that way about the way their career is going so far.
So that's kind of where I am right now, and why I feel like I relate to this movie now more than ever. I saw this at 12, watching that scene, and I'm like thinking, that's really pathetic. And now I'm watching this movie, and it's like, damn, he's got a job.
Yeah. I'm like, he knows people. Damn. He's out of the house.
He's got friends coming over.
Yeah, no, I hear your 12-year-old self say, "What a loser," and I'm like, he's actually not that much of a loser.
It's like,
he's
now
actually
I'm
kind
watching
of a cool dude.
my own experience right now. Unemployed, making short films, taking odd jobs to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm. And I will hear this kind of described just as a justification for why you'll take a job to do something like this. Like when you make content, when you are a filmmaker, when you're putting something out there, the stuff you have to do in the margins of your life to finance that and justify the amount of time you spend doing something where you don't make any money.
Yeah.
There is a kind of nobility in that service to yourself, to going doing these things. I don't want to say debasing, because I don't believe that anybody is above doing that work.
No.
But how frustrating it can be to feel like, I've been in my career long enough. Why is this still something I'm being asked to do? And that is a really kind of gut punch moment there, where you realize that it's really upsetting how relatable it is.
Yeah. And I hate that I'm getting older, and I'm just about to be 30 myself. Mm-hmm. And this is a movie that I feel more and more connected to the more I watch it.
But I feel like we've been really talking about the kind of deep ways that we relate to the sad parts of this movie.
I would love to talk about the fun stuff, because that's what I really get out of it.
It is worth saying, this is a very, very funny movie.
Very funny.
Very, very funny movie.
This is a movie that, when I say has altered my vocabulary, this shit has seriously altered my vocabulary, man.
Yeah.
The reason I say man so much is because of this movie, of how many times I've seen it.
The reason I say man so much is because he just like me FR, that's because we similar backgrounds. That's just the way we talk.
This is a movie that like it's infectious the way that these characters speak in this movie. They're so quotable and so funny, and they really do like give you new curse words that you never heard before.
Yes.
And even Bill.
Bill is, so I want to highlight
we
couple,
do need to talk about Bill.
I want to highlight at least the two other major players in this movie.
Yes.
There is Mike Shank, who is
he died last year, I think.
R.I.P.
Recently, yes.
He is Mark's childhood best friend.
Mm-hmm.
He has an often ill-defined role on Mark's movies. He does the music sometimes.
I think he's mostly audio, extra hands, emotional support, and he technically scores American Movie because all of the music is just videos of him playing guitar.
Yes.
There's no real like soundtrack other than Mike just playing guitar.
Yeah. So he is just kind of an all hands guy. And at the end, when Coven eventually does get released, it gets a premiere there in their town in Wisconsin. One of the last sound bites from Mike is, Mark is making movies and that's what he does. So I'll just keep doing it with him. And you learn more things about Mike over the course of the movie, which is that he's about 1.5 years sober at the time of shooting.
Yes.
That he kind of sees this as a kind of purpose, a stable, if anything, a stabilizing factor, which is kind of crazy to think of.
Really turned his life around. And you hear about it in the movie.
And that he doesn't look at this as some sort of like desperate, sad way to live his life.
There was a moment at the day I heard he died, I put on the movie again because I had to watch it.
And he's young. He was like 40 something.
He
was,
right? 50 maybe.
Yeah.
I think they were both born around 65, 66.
Yeah.
So it was like last year or so. But the moment that really got to me on the rewatch was the Thanksgiving scene. And when you're watching this movie, especially, like Mike seems like the sweetest guy in the whole world. Yeah. And if he's doing anything on the film, just his presence would just be easing tensions. That's like all you need sometimes. And he seems like that kind of guy.
There are multiple moments where Mark is getting really frustrated and you'll hear Mike make a crack that you would think would make anybody else like if this weren't your friend saying it, it would make you angrier. Oftentimes I think there's a moment he says they're about to go shoot something in the
brown
woods
gloves.
And he says, Mike, will you make sure everybody has brown gloves? And he shouts out within the same.
Does everyone have brown gloves?
And instead of getting angrier, he just laughs at it, or Mark just laughs at it.
But the moment that really got to me when I was rewatching it is the Thanksgiving scene, because they're sitting around, kids are falling asleep, and they're kind of like whispering and being quiet and just talking very intimately with the camera, like talking about what's going on and the theme of the holiday. And Mike is talking to the camera, and Mike is just like, and his voice is just like this. He's like, I'm very, very thankful for all the food.
Yeah.
For the friends I have. I won some money on the lotto. And thankful for all the food. Yeah, he's just rambling, and then it cuts to Mark, and he's like, "You know what I'm thankful for? I'm thankful for this guy right here, because I didn't want to get out of bed this morning, and this guy came over. He put a smile on my face."
Yeah, there's a running thread throughout this movie about alcoholism.
Yes,
and how it is. There's actually a really harrowing story that Mike tells about ODing and being taken to the emergency room.
Yes.
That he describes as kind of a turning point for him. It's not when he got sober, but it's when he decided, it's what he looks back on and says, that was my low.
Yeah.
But there is this kind of running thread, and it's actually, I think it's most telling in a quote from Mark later, where he's talking about when he was young, like a child, shooting things.
Yeah.
And he's like, there was nothing else but alcohol. We were out shooting film and we were out playing, but there was nothing but alcohol. All of it was to get money to do alcohol. All of it was so that it would be funnier when we were drinking alcohol. And it's this, what I find to be, unfortunately, very true thing about life, about that type of lifestyle.
It's a Midwestern thing too, especially, right?
It's a poor thing,
it's
very
a poor
specifically,
thing,
where it's why you see drug and alcohol issues in areas with no money. You're just like, I'm like, that is their escape.
Yeah.
That is the only thing you have to get out of the kind of crushing weight of the reality of what your situation is. And you see its effects on Mike and actually on another character who I want to talk about as well, Bill, who is Mark's uncle, who is elderly, very clearly
I think is also the blotch on Mark's kind of record. It's the one, like, it's kind of evil at points because Mark is very much swindling his uncle throughout this film.
Yes, he is. And well, here's the thing.
Mark believes in himself, but he's still swindling.
He believes in himself, but he's very opportunistic.
Yes.
In a way that I think can blind him to the morality.
Yes.
You know, he has this elderly uncle who is partially infirm. There are moments where he like fights back a little bit, but he's very clearly a lifelong alcoholic. I will say his drink order is the single most insane thing I've ever heard.
Did you write that down? Because I remember you made a face.
It's peppermint schnapps and Sprite on the rocks. That is a batshit insane drink order. That's completely fucking nuts. Peppermint in Sprite.
That's strange.
And he requests it specifically. They say, "What do you want us to make you?"
Oh, and there's a scary moment. There's a scary moment too, where he takes a sip of that, and it's the most lucid he sounds the entire film.
Yeah, he's like cogent after drinking it. He's like, "It's good," and that's the most communicative he is.
More background on who Bill is. Bill is, unfortunately, he died before the filming was fully completed. Yeah. He died right after the premiere of Coven.
Yeah.
So he made it to the premiere of Coven, but he is very unwell throughout like the entire film.
And he looks terrible.
He looks unwell.
Like he's like haggard. He is like literally skin and bones.
Yeah.
There's a scene where he has his shirt off and you can see the kind of the hollow underneath his armpit and how his chest is kind of concave from leaning over. You're right. Yeah. He is kind of being
he's very unwell, but that last scene you're talking about is he gets to deliver the last line of the movie. And I think that's why we're talking about this movie so deeply, is it tries to end on like such a deep quote from Bill. Like it's just Bill talking about life is the end of the movie. It's like the longest sentence he ever has. And he's just like,
it's a very uncomfortable shot.
It's just holding on him. He's like, make people happy, be a comedian.
Yeah.
He's just talking about
they're not even sentence fragments. They're just kind of like, it's the only movie I can think of whose final line is a series of dangling participles, like
I think it's appropriate for this film.
It is appropriate for this movie because it's about how kind of incomplete ideas can kind of crash into us when we allow them to just cascade over us and not actually develop into anything.
Yeah.
Bill is really tragic. I've known elderly, lifelong alcoholics like this before.
I will say Bill has probably, I think you called it the climax of the film.
I would call it the big set piece of this movie. And it actually shows you so much about Mark's psychology as well.
It is everything about the relationship between Mark and everyone around him. And you see his directing style, you see his passion, and you get to see what it's doing to the people around him, all in one simple, very simple scene.
Yeah. Mark thinks, I think he thinks to get Bill engaged and on board with this, he calls him an executive producer for financing the movie. He tells him, "Oh, this is your movie." He shows him pictures of an actress and says she wants to be in your movie. And he kind of gets it in his head that putting Bill in the movie as a cameo will make him more engaged and more excited about it. Whereas there are multiple interviews with Bill that shows you he is a man past being excited about anything. And he wants him to deliver this line that is the full line as written is, "It's all right. It's okay. There's something to live for. Jesus told me so." Which for a man who is borderline nonverbal is incredibly difficult to say.
They sit and he's got a boom mic and they're doing this line over and over again, at least 30 takes that we see.
Yes. Yeah. That we see until eventually Bill just tells him, "Is that enough? I'm not doing this anymore."
But it's my favorite line in the entire film, and it's from Bill. He goes, "This is for the shits and for the birds. This is for the birds." And when I'm like telling you that this movie gives you new curse words, that's one of them.
This is for the birds. As I was like, because you can see for a second. Because Mark is in the shot, like he's fully in the shot when Bill says you can see he puts his face in his hands for a second and then immediately recovers. He won't let himself feel that disappointment because I think on some level, Mark is aware that he's not doing this for Bill. He's doing this for himself. Like this specific scene. He's doing this because he can feel better about taking advantage of an old person. And yeah, I think this is the way he treats Bill is probably the worst thing he does in the movie. But what makes Bill so tragic is that it's not that there is it's not like he thinks that Mark has taken an interest in him and then he finds out he's got ulterior motives and only cares about the money. It's the really tragic thing about Bill is that he cannot muster, he is such a broken person. He can't muster the enthusiasm to care about anything, about his relationship with his nephew, about the movie, about being alive the next day, basically.
Well, that's also when I say like it's a blotch, and when I like accuse Mark of swindling his uncle, he's not like a malicious person. He does care about him. He does love his uncle. He cares about him. He's trying to get him engaged because he wants something better. Someone who didn't care about his uncle would not be involving him with the process. He would just be trying to get the money out of it.
But I feel like this is kind of analogous to staying in a romantic relationship on the basis of I can change him. He's treating not being enthusiastic about filmmaking as a character flaw in Bill, where as much as you and I might disagree with this, that is not a character flaw. To be indifferent to the making of a movie is not a character flaw. And I think Mark just can't accept that. One, because it's a logistical issue that gets in the way of him financing his movies. And two, I think he is so entrenched in his own worldview, it's very hard for him to understand that there are other people with different priorities.
Yes.
I think that those are kind of the three big characters. I mean, there's other characters who matter. Those are the three.
Technically, the third is Tommy, who's the main like supporting actor of Coven.
In much of the movie.
He's not in a lot of the movie, but he's the main supporting actor. And he gets like second billing, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. I wonder if it's because he gets second billing in Coven. I wonder if it's just kind of a nod to that.
Yeah.
Which I want to touch on. We don't need to go too deep into Coven.
Yeah.
Neither of us had seen it and we threw it on afterwards.
So I had never seen Coven before, and I have a good reason for that. Never saw Coven because I've made Coven. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I've made it. I don't need to see it.
Do you want to like give a really basic description of what Coven is as a movie?
Yeah, Coven is like, I don't know. It feels like somewhat autobiographical to a point where it's like the main character is an alcoholic who gets brought to an AA meeting that's run by vampire cult people.
Yeah, and it turns out
coven. It's a coven or a coven.
Yeah, and they can't help him.
Yeah,
and it turns out they're trying to hurt him. And I don't even. It's a
whatever.
pretty. It is not. The frustrating thing about Coven is that for as interesting as the story of its making is, it's a deeply boring and uninteresting movie. There's just really there's not much there.
He's too competent of a filmmaker too for it to be something to like point and laugh at. Cause
it's not like The Room.
It's not like The Room. Like it's intelligible. You can follow what's happening. Conversations
it's just kind of a boring
kind of makes sense, but like it also has the amateur quality of like, this is a very clear writer, director, star kind of piece where every confrontation, he wins the fight fairly easily and runs away. Yeah. Like that is very, like that's an easy, like, you see that in every writer, director, star kind of deal, like especially first timers. Like he's never in a losing position in any of
his character.
His character is never in the losing position. That's like a simple thing that you see, but like it is intelligible. Scenes string together. They all make sense. But the other thing that is slightly amateurish about it is the script.
I would say the script is more than slightly amateurish.
And the reason why I say that is because every single character talks like Mark Borchardt.
They all talk like Mark Borchardt, but they talk like dialogue that Mark Borchardt has written as a first draft.
Poor people had to memorize that.
The thing is, there actually is a scene in American Movie where he's at a casting call and he's hearing people read things out loud, and they're bad actors. I'm not going to defend them. They're bad actors. But he comes, it cuts away from them directly to him, and he says, "They're butchering my words, man."
Yeah, it's good. It's so perfectly timed.
He jumps in as a scene partner with somebody. And it's not like he is doing it well. He's just throwing so much energy at it that it's just, when you see someone just doing so much on screen, you're like, I don't know if this is good, but it's bare minimum, it's interesting. Yeah. Like there's something going on here.
I think, and this is a speculation, but what I think happened, because I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Mark, to me, seems like he saw some low budget horror films and got inspired for it. And I think he might have been inspired to be a writer and really get into this filmmaking business when he saw Clerks. And I'm just saying because that timeline lines up, and that's another very profanity-laced film where like his script writing, it feels like he's trying to be that realistic kind of script with a ton of swearing in it. Which, I also realized I call it swearing because of this movie.
Yeah.
There's a line in this movie where his kid says shit and he's like, hey man, did you just swear?
He's not mad. He's not mad at me. Yeah. He's like, I'm not mad. I just want to know. He said, is that your first swear? That's what he says to him. He's like, I just, so like I can record it in the baby book, basically.
Yeah.
He's not I want to touch on his family a little bit. He's not a terrible father.
Yeah.
He is, when he's with them, which it sounds like is not a lot.
Yeah.
He's attentive. He's like funny and charming with them. They seem to like him.
Them. He's like, can you,
they like talking about
hold the camera for this shot? Yeah.
There's a couple talking heads with him that don't feel exploitative or gross at all. I mean, they're honestly really cute.
There's a scene where they're talking. They do have some talking heads with the kids. They have them all together and they're like, what's the last movie you guys saw together? And they go, Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. And they keep trying to describe plot points from Apocalypse Now.
And one of the guys like, Dahawa.
And are just totally unequipped to like even approach the subject. You can, his wife, who, as far as I can, his ex-wife, who, as far as I can tell, only appears from behind in one shot of the movie. Interestingly enough, she is an associate producer on Coven. I don't know if you saw it in the block.
That makes sense.
She is listed as an associate producer, so you wonder if like at some point that's a conversation. It's not depicted in American movie. It's over 3 years
that he made it though. So
but that's the thing, is that at some point maybe is some argument of contrition towards, her, because there's at one point where she talks about.
You're not talking about Jen, because Jen is the associate
I'm not talking about Jen.
Okay,
I'm talking about Alyssa. Alyssa's name is in the associate producer.
Yeah, I missed that then.
Jen is his current girlfriend, who, from his telling of it, is 3 years ago. Alyssa, the mother of his children, doesn't want to be with him anymore and has a new partner with whom she wants to leave the Wisconsin area, presumably because she's sick of Mark's bullshit.
Yeah.
And he's angry that he can't have his children near him while also having his life with movie making and his current girlfriend, Jen, who has a really, honestly, like, it's bizarre she is with him because she is so level-headed and is able to so convincingly explain his appeal and why he wants to do things the way he wants to do them.
Yeah.
Is the statement from her that I love so much is, Mark wants to be somewhere other than where he's at, but doesn't everybody want to be somewhere other than where they're at? Like she explains his idiosyncrasies away without sounding like an apologist.
No.
But in such a way where she's like, well, this makes sense to me. I don't really get why everyone's so confused by this.
She's like the most normal character in this film.
It is bizarre how normal she is. Like she doesn't
but they
fit
still
in
like
with them.
There's still some fun editing there. That's actually something really funny about this is the editing. The editing really adds to a lot of the scenes in this movie. Like one I forgot about was like you hear Mark's parents are talking about some of the people involved in the film. They're talking about this guy Kenny.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just think Kenny's a bad influence and, Mark shouldn't be around Kenny. He was always a bad influence growing up. He's a bad influence now. And it cuts to a shot of them in the car. And you hear the Chris Smith, the producer director, like, hey, Mark, where are we going? And Mark's like, we're picking up Kenny from the prison.
I think that like, well, I want to talk about intentionality and how comedy works in this movie a little bit, because you said Chris Smith is hired on to do a documentary of the making of what he thinks is going to be a full-scale feature film.
Yes.
He ends up pretty early on in that process pivoting to making a documentary about the psychology of a man who has been broken down to making something less than he wants to make.
And he definitely stuck around because he found a really great subject. He found a great person for the camera.
Mark is so, even though what he's saying, like if you wrote his stuff out, it would look like if you wrote it, transcribed it, and then tried to read it back. Yeah. And so you were saying it in anything other than his cadence, it would make no fucking sense.
Yeah.
That being said, he is deeply charismatic and very interesting to look at. I would actually argue Mike even more so.
Yeah.
Because when he is talking, I'm just rapt. Everything he says, he sounds like kind of like he's like a philosopher. Almost.
Oh, Mike. Yeah. Cause Mike, he stays completely still with everything he says. And he has like such a caring and kind voice and demeanor with everything he says, where he's just, he talks about how he switched from drugs to gambling and that's his new thing. And that you're hooked on it. Cause it's like, this sounds like a nice, just sounds like a nice guy. He's like, I switched to scratch offs because, with the lottery, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but it's better than drugs and alcohol because with drugs and alcohol,
Especially
you always
drugs.
lose.
Especially drugs. You always lose.
Always lose.
And he just kind of, everything he says, he looks like somebody who is not doing much thought.
Yes.
And everything he says is so measured that you're like, it's almost like Buddhist teachings, you know, like there is a Zen to Mike. Whereas Mark is he's stressful to listen to. He's like stressful and chaotic.
It's so fun that they're like perfect comedic foils.
They really are.
They're just real guys who are friends.
You know, you find this, I in my lifetime, like in friendships I've had and that I've observed, I find that like, if anything, this is not surprising. This is just a pairing that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have one guy who is not a wet blanket or anything, but is just kind of like calm and passive is maybe a way to describe Mike.
He's also like he might be one of the last people who is like still believing in Mark kind of deal too.
I don't know how much he believes in Mark. I think that
he just is a supportive guy.
I think that he is a guy in recovery.
Yeah.
Understands. Well, I think it's what he understands about himself and what he understands about Mark that he is never making explicit. What he understands about himself is this way of life keeps me sober, and that's the most important thing in my life. So that's why I'm going to keep doing this. Yeah. And what he understands about Mark is that is a guy at an earlier stage of what I'm in. He doesn't realize he's an addict. Yeah. And what
I think he does a little bit because he makes it.
I just think he's not at a point where he can start doing any recovery.
Yeah.
On a conscious level, he is not accepting that he's an addict, that Mark is an addict.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Mike recognizes that about Mark, recognizes that pointing it out to Mark wouldn't do anything because he's too early on in his recovery process to do anything with that information. Yeah. And understands I have to be in this person's life for their good. Yeah. In addition
Mike is just a complete angel of a person.
He is. It's incredibly tragic that we've lost him, so young. I don't know. How much did he do with regards to filmmaking himself?
Oh, the two of them kind of became a thing afterwards where they became like Adult Swim famous, let's say, is the term I'll use, where like they showed up in weird bullshit here and there. And I think maybe one of the biggest things that probably the thing with the most eyes that they were ever in was like they were in a Family Guy joke. Like they just show up as a cameo in a Family Guy joke once. And
do they voice themselves?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They voice themselves in it. And they just show up on like real strange projects here and there, usually playing themselves. Like that's the idea. Because that's the crowd that's going to like this movie.
I think so. And the thing is that as upsetting and difficult to watch as it can sometimes be, this is, and I feel like this has been a more kind of serious toned episode than what we usually do, honestly.
Yeah, it went, I have a list of things that I wrote that were just like, hey, I related to this, but it's like, this is a deep movie because it like connected to me on this way, right?
Yeah, I think despite that, the fact that it shows all these things that are so difficult, I think this is a movie I would recommend to basically anybody.
Yeah,
I know you would because you do recommend it to basically
I do recommend it to everybody.
Like in the middle of a handshake, you hand over a DVD jewel case to them and like in your palm.
But this, it's a movie where like every little scene in this is just like, fuck, I've done that. And then, like the more I watch it, it's like, yeah, this really is what my life ended up becoming. This is like almost prophetic at points. Yeah, there are like little things that you learn over the career of filmmaking. You see it quite a lot in this one. It's just like the little things that go wrong on set. It's like, yeah, that's happened too. Like I had a case once where, everyone when they're young at some point does a blood and guts movie. And I did like a blood and guts kind of movie at one point in like my grandmother's, like not garage, the driveway, which was hidden enough from the street where I felt comfortable enough doing a blood and guts kind of thing, but not like hidden well enough. But it turned out that the blood that we used was not like safe for human contact, it turned out. So my friend and I ended up completely like head to toe covered in blood. And then we took out the hose and it was just like tried to spray each other off. It's like, and we stained our skin with this. God. Yeah, we like stained ourselves. We needed like fucking scrub brushes, not at the same time, didn't look at each other, but
oh my God.
Pretty much needed scrub brushes to get that shit off. It's got stuck.
It's funny you bring up like kiddie splatter movies. Yeah. There are a couple clips of like his home movies that he made when he was a kid.
Oh, like The More the Scarier.
The More the Scarier, which Great is title. Honestly a fantastic title. Yep. Some of those are pretty impressive for like backyard movies.
I think even Coven is kind of impressive for a movie that's made on essentially a $3,000 budget. essentially.
Yes, for $3,000, it looks pretty good.
It looks okay. It's competently made. But yeah, the backyard stuff with the Super 8 film. Or is it is it Super 8? It looks like Super 8.
I believe it's
me.
like Super it's Super 8.
Yeah.
But it's not like there is no talent there. It's that
it's competent storytelling, and what you could tell about like someone, especially that age, because like he's teenager when he's making this stuff. You can tell he has idea of screen direction, of composition, of shot sequencing, because you're hearing this over someone else's voice in a documentary style, and this is just B-roll, and you can still follow it.
It's not, it's not like he hasn't kind of self-educated himself on like the language of film.
Yeah,
you see all the books he has, in his office.
Yeah,
you see him like kind of frustratedly trying to explain the concept of like framing to his mother when he needs her to act as a camera person at one point,
which I've done. I've done that before.
But the cradle in which he was born,
yes,
the cradle of like the community that he is born into, just means there's no fostering of those specific talents where he's going to live. And two, there's no real way out. If you move away from that area, it is almost always due to a stroke of like luck and timing.
Yeah.
That gets you out of those situations and into something else that is even mildly sustainable so that you can try and make a living somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's hard. The one other kind of point of comparison I thought of while I was watching this movie, actually, especially in the relationship between Mark and Uncle Bill, is I kept thinking of Ed Wood the entire time.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me hear this.
Well, no.
Another one of my favorite films ever.
Ed Wood is amazing.
Like my top three movies about making movies: American Movie, Ed Wood, and have you ever seen Living in Oblivion?
I've never seen Living in Oblivion, but I'll add it to the list.
Yeah.
Well, no, because you've got this dubiously talented, young person, who is determined to be making movies no matter what, despite the protestation of basically everybody around him, and he enlists the help in the case of American Movie monetarily, in the case of Ed Wood through former prestige and name recognition in the form of Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
And kind of forces an old man who is not seeking to be a mentor to them, who they have projected the idea of them being a mentor. They've basically like saying, you'll be my mentor, right? And they're like, I'm a heroin addict. I don't really know what to tell you. And he's like, yeah, you're my mentor now. You're going to come here and basically help me around. And in both cases, they took advantage of those older people and their kind of mentally infirm, addiction-addled state. And I just couldn't stop thinking of the parallels between the two of them. I wonder if at the time Mark Borchardt had seen Ed Wood and had any thoughts on it, because that was an area that I think he was kind of unwilling to be self-aware about.
Yeah, at the time. I mean, now he's got a great sense of humor about it.
He seems to be pretty insightful and pretty understanding of what his place in culture is, even if it's maybe not what he originally envisioned for himself.
Yeah. So you know what movie this reminds me of?
What?
The movie that I think of is, you ever seen Be Kind, Rewind?
I've not seen Be Kind, Rewind.
So the premise of that one is like another, like, it's Mos Def and Jack Black, and they run the last tape store in the city, last VHS rental store in the city, and they accidentally erase all the tapes. And in order to, it's convoluted and stupid, but in order to, get something back up on the shelves, they decide to just refilm every movie that's up there in their backyards. So it's a very fun premise for a movie. Another one I relate to deeply on, like a zero budget filmmaking in the backyard kind of thing. Oh, I want to talk about probably my favorite part of American Movie, and it's the kitchen cabinet scene.
We haven't talked about this. This is I think maybe the most memorable set piece, but go ahead and walk us through it.
So the kitchen cabinet is, like, for me, very memorable because it's like when you have an idea in your head and you've like seen enough movies and you see the final product of how something is supposed to work, and you kind of have a tiny bit of background is like how, the effect is done. You think you can do it yourself. And the idea behind this scene is, Mark takes Tommy, the other actor in the film, and he's supposed to be in a fight sequence with him where Tommy's head ends up going through a kitchen cabinet.
Yes.
And in order to make this safe for Tommy, they cut a score into the back of the cabinet.
Yeah.
And it's not deep enough. So you see take after take of Tommy's head getting slammed into this cabinet.
Into what is basically a solid board.
It's a solid piece of wood.
Yeah.
It's a solid piece of wood with a little notch cut in the back, nowhere near enough to like score this thing at all. And there's a scene where like Mark is just like, he's like trying to break it with his hand. He's like, he punches it as hard as he can. He's like, oh shit, I just tried to put your head through that. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, it's
rough. This is one that I unfortunately kind of relate to, but it was me. I was the one who got hurt in the process. Okay. So I got a good story about this.
Well, that's good.
So when you're young and you see movies and you understand the idea of, you know, I've seen this effect. I think I know how it's done. I can do it myself. You kind of are an impressionable kid and you want to, you know, make it yourself. Mm-hmm. So I was probably 12 years old and I was at my grandparents' in the backyard and I was trying to do like the Indiana Jones kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I was making a scene for like a backyard movie where, you know, when Indiana Jones slides under the door, he drops his hat, he goes back and he grabs it and he runs away. So I was trying to do that in the garage, and the garage door was not like an automatic door. It was a, like, you had to like pull it up kind of thing. So what happened was I had my brother like slowly lower the door, you know, he must have been 10, 11 at the time. And I'm like 12. Yeah, he must have been 10 years old. So he's like lowering it slowly for me to get under it. But it's a fucking garage door and he's 10 years old. So what happens is we get the shot just fine of me sliding under the door. That one works. But the slide of me going in and grabbing the hat, we film that from the other angle. And I'll have to see if I have this footage somewhere and send it to you. But yeah, he drops that fucking 1,000-pound garage door right on my arm.
Oh my God.
I was fine. Surprisingly walked away with it just fine.
If you have the footage, I would happily throw it up. You know, I would love to post the telling of this story. Jesus Christ.
But yeah, just don't try this at home, as they say.
Have a set safety coordinator if you can.
Yeah, I should have known better.
On that note of your own personal American movie experience, I kind of want to leave off and say that, like, this is a movie I have gone from liking to kind of like outright loving. And it wasn't just that watch and this watch. I have thought about it a great deal in between. Mm-hmm. And obviously we've had conversations about it, you know, like when we talked about doing this, we were going to go see this at a theater a couple months ago. We didn't talk about the venue. We saw this in your living room.
Yes.
It was a pretty non-disruptive audience until, somebody was like really rude. He like walked in from another.
Oh yeah, he was fuzzy.
Theater.
Yeah.
We're of course talking about your cat Noodle.
Yes.
Who interrupted the middle of the movie to just kind of. Actually, he was
headbutting and meowing.
Yes, he was headbutting and meowing, which generally speaking, I don't like in a theater experience. Mm-hmm. But no, this is a little bit of a format break for us. I actually think that, like, spoiler, because I'm not 100% sure when this is coming out. This was a last minute like fill in. Mm-hmm. You have another thing on the docket for us right now that is actually like a new release.
Yes.
Spoiler. We can just go ahead and say what it is because I actually think it'll already be out. Mm-hmm. We're doing an episode on the new Nick Cage film Arcadian.
Yes.
Because we had kind of made a commitment to be like, it would be fun to go back and do
another Nick Cage movie.
You know, another Nick Cage movie. So we're seeing that soon. And like I said, that episode will actually probably already be out by the time this one.
Must be. You should do the new
I think we're probably going to do that one first. But I think this is kind of the way we're going to do. I'm more about, what I say, they're like movies and where we meet them, but it's much as like, where they meet us, basically. You know, this was a last minute thing that we threw together. But I don't think the experience of watching this together was any worse for not having been in the theater.
No, and I think this is the kind of movie that almost benefits from the ability to like be able to talk about it as it's happening.
Yeah, because we're not talking throughout it, but we certainly, we had questions or observations or, oh, hey, did you catch that this time?
Yeah.
So I want to end this conversation the way that I end all my conversations. You have several entries on the list, one of which we technically just covered. This is technically a guest choice, even though we didn't see it in a movie theater. But I'm hoping that we can kind of open up the possibility for some of these unlikely to happen movies by having episodes like this, because I actually really loved talking about this movie, even if we try to be funny here. We're not serious critics. I feel like there was less of an emphasis on that.
Because that's also because of like how much this movie talks to not just me, but I think it really
experience.
I think the title American movie is very apt because this is a really great highlight of what it is to try to live the American dream. I think a lot of deep conversation comes out of such a silly movie.
Yeah. I strongly recommend anybody who hasn't seen it to watch it because I think it's just a really important, if nothing else, it's a really important insight into what it is like to be an American filmmaker.
Yes.
And how this one specific example really speaks to elements that are going to be universal to the experience of not only every type of filmmaker, but I would say every type of artist, every type of dreamer, every type of person who aspires to do something that they've been told is above their means or their station in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's simply transcendent. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. That being said, to get back to the final discussion question that I like to throw out to every guest, what obscure movie that is unlikely to screen, that we may even have to screen ourselves, that you want to go to bat for, or that you want to talk about a specific aspect of, what movie is that for you?
Shit, I'm put on the spot on this one. I forgot to think about it for this one. No, I would love to watch, get me in for a horror film or something like that. Or if no one's done it before, have you ever done Hausu?
We've never done Hausu. I would love to talk about Hausu. I would need to, in order to have a fruitful discussion about that, I would need to learn a lot about the behind the scenes of it, I think.
That's why it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great movie otherwise, but
it is
I think
a genuinely excellent movie on its own. But I think for a fruitful discussion of it, I would need to know a ton about the behind the scenes.
But any cool, like visually stunning kind of thing, or just like interesting horror films I'd love to watch.
We have you kind of penciled in for when Terrifier 3 comes out later this year.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll do a new one on that. But other than that, do you have anything that you want to plug, that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I could talk about, you want to talk about living the American dream and making something that is just an encouragement to continue doing what you love, whether or not the circumstance, forget the circumstances, do what you love because you love doing it.
Are you plugging following your dreams?
Kind of, a little bit. So you want to talk about the American dream? I'm going to plug, I have a short film called Pizza Dreams, which premise of that movie is forget about what happened in the past. Keep doing what you love because you love doing it. And I'm very proud to announce that this is a movie that just won Best Overall Short Film at the Albany 2024 Albany Film Festival, which I think is a really big deal. It's a New York themed film winning in the state capitol. I think that's
that's really cool.
I'm very proud of that.
I'm very glad that we can actually go public with this, because I think you kind of let me know on the DL.
Yeah.
Privately, just one-on-one. So I'm really excited for you.
Yes.
We have been talking about Pizza Dreams kind of as an ongoing thing that's like making the rounds right now. It is a really impressive. I don't want to insult it by categorizing it as a no budget movie, but it basically is a no budget movie. That being said, it looks professional grade. The animation that you've put into it, it's an excellent movie that I would encourage. Is it available anywhere?
Only 3 minutes. It's not available just yet, but if you do want to get some behind the scenes, you could see it at my website or some behind the scenes. AlexanderMCampo.com.
So you can go to Alex's website. We can also, if it's available, whenever it's available, regardless of if you come on for it, we'll make sure that we, promote it here. And because I would love anybody who's listened to us talk about that movie, make sure they go out of their way to see it.
Yeah.
Because it really, like you said, it's only 3 minutes, but it is really an excellent.
And if I was a little more emotional on this one than usual and a little deeper than usual, it's because this is a movie that speaks to me so much. Because this is a movie that I started watching when I was making movies in the backyard, and now I'm literally a Best Picture award-winning filmmaker, and that's a big deal. And this is a movie that's been with me that whole time.
That validation, it is the seeking of that catharsis that I think leads somebody like Mark Borchardt to keep tilting at windmills over and over and over.
You know what catharsis means? No.
With that being said, I would like to thank Lily Steinberg for helping to produce the show and being our social media manager. I want to thank Kristen Ang for her logo artwork. And that being said, this has been Bad First Impression. You can follow us on all social medias at BFI Pod. You can help the show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are listening to this. If you are watching us on YouTube, thank you for, making sure you're watching as well as listening. And if you're there, make sure that you comment, subscribe to our channel, and hit the little bell up in the corner so you get notification whenever we post new episodes. I think we're going to be switching those episodes to post on Friday afternoon instead of Thursday evening, so it comes out the same day as the audio version. And if you want to reach out to us, feel free to message us on any social media. Or also you can email us at mailbag@bfipod.com if you have suggestions, if you have questions, if you think that there's something that we should cover. We're always taking input for that sort of thing. And as always, I've been your host, Devin Warner. You can find me personally on social media at WhatIfDevin. And I think I know the line I want to go out on here. Do you think you know the same one? Because there's a lot of lines from this movie. Do you want to just start saying them at the same time and hope it's the same one?
Oh, I don't think I know.
You don't know that it's the big
I'm 30
one.
years old, that one?
No.
This is for the shits and for the birds?
No, well, this episode is for the birds, but I was going to say until next time, it's all right.
It's okay. There's something to live for. Jesus told me so.